As 2025 comes to a close, we're going to reflect on a big year for us and for the Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, December 31st, 2025. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade, and today it's our final show of 2025. So we're going to look back on one of the greatest seasons in Mariners history and our best year yet here on Locked On Mariners. But before we do, I want to shout out our title sponsor today, FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. It's been a long year, Colby, from the carryover of last year's garbage off season, which turned out to be okay-ish because Jorge Polanco kind of saved it in retrospect. But just dealing with all of that, going into the season with pretty low expectations for this club because of how the offseason went, and then being taken on this incredible ride, especially from September onward, where like they just kept winning all the way to Game 7 of the ALCS. Unfortunately, we all know how that ended, but it was in many ways the best season in Mariners history, and in others, at least one of the best seasons of Mariners history. And we did a lot of reflection on the year after the season was all said and done, but we didn't really talk about our favorite moments that much because I wanted to save that for an episode like this, and it's the final day of the year, so no better time than now to kind of do that. So looking back on the 2025 Mariners season, what are some of your favorite memories?
Yeah, there's obviously like big moments, and like the playoffs are going to take up most of that conversation. But I always enjoy like thinking about those random, just like what moments, like the random stretch where Leody Taveras was like the clutchest player on the planet. Big home run in Chicago, Gametime hit in his debut. He made like this incredible catch against the Astros, and yeah, the rest of the time was not very good. But that
didn't he have a big hit against the Blue Jays?
I believe he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. I mean,
like in the series where they got swept in Seattle.
Yeah, probably. Speaking of, Rowdy going off in Toronto was hilarious, and that was literally his entire value for the whole season.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw Ben Williamson's only home run of the year in Toronto.
Mm-hmm. Miles Mastrobuoni's ridiculous catch to not win them the game, but advance the game deeper into extras in Texas.
Yeah,
it's those little weird things where it's just like these players who 10 years from now we're going to be like, oh yeah, that guy was on the team. Those are always fun, but I think more than anything, you remember the big moments, and obviously the storyline of 2025 is Cal Raleigh. Like any way you want to slice it. We witnessed probably, the greatest offensive catcher season we've ever seen. Not only beating, catcher records, but shattering them. And honestly, we saw something we'll probably never see again. It is incredibly rare, and it is awesome to think back and, would have loved to have paid it off with a World Series, but getting into Game 7 of an ALCS, it's pretty good payoff. And it, the fact that it came on the heels of like Cal committing to you after that disastrous off season, it would have been very easy for him to be like, no, what are we doing? I'm not interested in sticking out here long term. So yeah, 2025 is the year of Cal Raleigh, even though the team didn't pay it off with a World Series title, and the voters wouldn't even give him the MVP award. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer that it ended the way it did, but 2025 is definitely the year of Cal Raleigh.
And there's just so many Cal moments to think back on. I mean, the best one for me was whole stadium chanting MVP when they're down 2-0 against the Rays, against Griffin Jacks, and he goes yard, into deep right center field. That was an MVP moment. There were so many moments where that's an MVP moment where the whole stadium, they're blowing out the Rockies. They're going to win the division, but the whole stadium just wants to see one more home run from Cal. They want to see him hit number 60, and he comes out there and he does it. Like, that's MVP stuff. The whole, stadium in Rogers Center in game 1 when they're down 1-0, Kevin Gossman is dealing, and the whole stadium in Rogers Center is, booing Cal, and there's people in my section chanting that Judge is better and Vladdy's better and all this stuff, and then he shuts them all up with that game tying home run, and the Mariners wind up going on to win that game.
I think it kind of gets overlooked, but Cal hit the big home run in game 5 to tie that game before Gino won it with his grand slam, and it's almost impossible to put, like, what's your favorite Cal Raleigh homer? There are certainly, plenty to choose from. But yeah, like it is, overall, and I said this at the end of the year, like when we look back at the 2025 season, 10, 15 years from now, whatever it is, we'll talk about two things. We'll talk about Cal Raleigh, and unfortunately we will be still talking about Dan Wilson and how he managed that game 7. It's just the way it goes. That is unfortunate, but that is the way it goes. When we talk about the 2014 Seahawks, we talk about Marshawn Lynch, and we talk about the decision to throw from the 1. That's the whole season boiled down to 2 things, and that's just the way it goes. So, Cal was incredible in 2025. We'll probably never see it again from any catcher. It was kind of the year that Cal Raleigh became a household name. Which is awesome and well-deserved on his part. Obviously he wasn't the only one who had a great year, and a lot of memories forged by other players that I'm sure we'll talk about here, but 2025 was about Cal Raleigh. There's no question about it.
Yeah. You saw the brand take off in real time. You saw Major League Baseball really start to get behind him and push him, to the forefront of like their marketing campaigns and all that, especially around the All-Star game when he was in the home run derby and all that. Also him winning the home run derby, and beating Brent Rooker by like a tenth of a foot or whatever it was.
They were that accurate. Yeah.
yeah, totally. The fix was in. And for once, it was for the Mariners, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I mean, again, there's just so many Cal moments, too many to name on this show. But another one, near the start of the season where he hit like 6 home runs in a week against like the Reds and the Rangers. Like, that was crazy. Like, and that's kind of like when you started to know, like, oh, this is different. This is different from Cal. Like, Cal was already, very special. Cal was already, to me, the best catcher in the game. Cal, to me, was already the best catcher in Mariners history. But he took it up to another level. And you could tell, like, fairly early on that this was going to be pretty special. We didn't know that it was going to be 60 home run special. I mean, there were so many times over the course of the year that we just doubted that he was going to get to that next milestone. But it became pretty apparent that like he was going to challenge, Salvador Perez for the catcher record, and eventually that got broken a lot quicker than we expected, and then it started to become like, what else can he do?
You remember that one of the few blow up games that Bizzardo had in Cincinnati, and then the Mariners hit back-to-back jacks, I think, to tie it, and they won it in extras. Yeah. So, there is always those fun little moments that happen so early in the year. Like, all the focus is always on September and October, rightfully so. It's not hard to see why that's the case, but there are some moments, how about when they beat Abreu twice?
Yeah. The comeback against
Julio.
the Astros at home, the grand slam by Randy, the walk-off walk.
Julio going to right field on the 99 on the lower outside corner. And then he did it again in Houston against Abreu to tie that game up. Like, how about vanquishing the Astros finally?
That's what I was going to say was my favorite memory of all of 2025 was going down to Houston and smoking them. Not just overcoming them, not just beating them and winning the division, smoking them.
I don't know. It was cathartic, I guess. It was a weight off your shoulders, and it was just kind of like...
It felt good.
Yeah. I mean, like, you've been going toe-to-toe with them, and you had won some season series, and, like, obviously the team like they weren't afraid of they weren't intimidated by the Astros. That had ended, a couple of years ago. Something I don't think Scott Service ever got enough credit for was kind of ending the mystique of the Astros. Like, oh, we're playing the Astros, that's going to be tough. And over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been like, oh, we're playing the Astros, awesome. Like, we're going to take it to them. And for them to finally slay that dragon in their home ballpark and just see the will be sucked out of the Astros players and all that. It really was a monumental series, and it was awesome. It was one of the more important regular season series in franchise history going in, and it ended up being arguably the most important series in franchise history coming out of it. So it's awesome to see, and it was a lot of fun, and the anxiety, the buildup of hey, they play the Astros in 15 days, they better not sleep on these other teams, but that probably decides the division, blah blah blah. If they could just take 2 of 3, if they could just go in there and only be a game back and try to win that division, and then they swept, and it was basically over at that point. It was awesome, and definitely way up there on the on the importance scale of 2025 and the memorable scale of 2025.
Do you remember, I forget if it was game 1 or game 2, Joe Espada was like crashing out over something. I think someone got ejected. Do you remember what that was about? I don't off the top of my head, but it was that moment though that I realized, like, oh, we got them.
They're spiraling.
Yeah.
Like they just lost Jordan like a few days before.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure Astro fans who sometimes watch our show randomly, I'm sure they're screaming.
Only when they win, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Convenient, right? Yeah.
They're spiraling. Oh, we weren't healthy. We were. Yeah, well, whatever. You're not division champs either, so.
Our rotation wasn't healthy.
Yeah, don't know what to tell you. You gave up a grand slam to JP Crawford. Like that's on you. Jordan Alvarez is your best pitcher too. I don't know what to tell you, but it was awesome to see. And obviously 2026, a big focus will be on doing it again and keeping the Astros down and making this your division officially. But for 2025, at least for that 3-day stretch, you were kings of the division, and then you wrapped it up a few days later against what is to this day one of the worst baseball teams I've ever seen play, the Colorado Rockies. But awesome times. Speaking
of that road trip, Colby, coming up, I'm going to tell you the funniest moment of the entire season. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Mariners with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month. $50 a year. Go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. So the funniest moment of 2025, Colby. Look, irony and the ability to laugh at yourself is a big part of being a Mariners fan. Which leads me to saying that the funniest moment of 2025 was the Mariners going on this insane win streak at the start of September after hope was starting to be lost and then the Etsy witch thing happened and all that. And then they go to Kansas City. And that win streak is snapped by none other than Adam Frazier, who goes oppo off of Matt Brash. That is by far the funniest thing that happened all year.
I think the funniest thing that happened all year is Josh Naylor jumping up to break up the double play and taking a ball off the dome, but sure.
Oh, that was pretty funny. That was pretty funny too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Adam Frazier was funny, sure. Moment of failure is the funniest, sure, why not?
It's very Mariners. And look, in hindsight, it didn't matter at all, so we can laugh about it.
Sure. I mean, had they not had, that was Matt Brash too, by the way. Had he not surrendered that homer, really cheap homer, the Mariners probably would have won that game, and they would have won 18 in a row in September. So like that's nuts. The Adam Frazier revenge game, sure. Wrapping that ball around the left field foul pole, the only spot in Kansas City that guy could hit a home run at.
If you could have seen my face when I watched that happen, and you know how anxious I was about that entire series.
Yep.
Playing and Kaufman. Yeah.
There's that one game where they got out to a big lead, and I was like, "Oh, Ty is very afraid of this."
Yeah.
And then they got it to within like 4, and I was like, "Oh no, Ty's crashing out." And they ended up winning that game, I think, by like 5 or 6. And
I think they were up
I know
8-1.
Ty was more nervous for that. Yeah, I know Ty was more nervous for that than you were for the Astros series. I still vote for the Naylor thing. Speaking of Naylor, greatest trade deadline acquisition in Mariners history.
Yeah.
I mean, now granted, I'm not the big Mariners historian, but a lot of the deals I remember the Mariners making at the deadline weren't very good. The Jason Varitek one comes to mind immediately. Now, obviously, Randy Arozarena was a great deadline addition, and Luis Castillo was a great deadline addition. They've been very good at that recently, but I think Randy, you didn't make the playoffs with Randy, like the year that you acquired him, and Josh Naylor was such a huge part of that, and was so incredible in the playoffs after you acquired him and all that too. That I think it's possible to say that we witnessed the greatest off-season or trade deadline acquisition in Mariners history, and that's no disrespect to Luis Castillo, who also is definitely on that list. But Josh Naylor, what a deadline, and it was almost that much better. They almost landed Duran, and I can't help but think if they had been able to push that across the finish line, we might be having a different conversation today. It was an incredible deadline after a terrible off season, and Jorge Polanco breaking out, and he had some huge hits, and at times he was your best hitter, and so it really was kind of fun to see the Mariners go after and actually break their rules and go after rentals and to have those guys come in and perform right away. And I know the numbers weren't great, but the day they traded for Gino was obviously massive and something that team really needed. Just to lift the spirits and whatnot. It was a really good deadline too, and that was fun to cover on our end. But Josh Naylor, I mean, the dude is already probably going to be named top 50 Mariner of all time. Like, how insane is that? But hashtag riding with Rodney. But
That's right.
it really is insane. The summer of Josh Naylor is something else we'll talk about long after we talk about Cal Raleigh and Dan Wilson. So
speaking of funny Josh Naylor things, right? You mentioned him, jumping into the double play, all that. How about just him like becoming a stolen base machine out of nowhere? Mm-hmm. Hilarious. Yeah. By the way, that Royals game, so they were up 9-0. Then it was 9-1. Then they got another run, and then it was 10-1. Then it was 10-3. Then it was 10-5. Remember, that was the Carter Jensen game?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, no. It's 10-5. I'm like...
Did Bryce Miller start that game, too?
I think it was Logan. It was Logan.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Logan against Waka. Yeah, they...
and the final score was?
It was 12-5. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all worked out in the end, but I was
never got within a swing of the bat, but Ty was panicked.
Yeah, they brought in Luke Jackson, who gave up 2 runs, and I'm like, oh no. And then Gabe came in, and I think if I'm not mistaken, they had a couple of runners on, and Gabe like shut that down. And I was like, oh thank God. And then Emerson Hancock came in, and I'm like, oh no, oh no. And clean inning for Emerson.
Remember when Hancock came in and 10-1 or whatever in game 2?
It's Ron. Yeah.
He went 2 innings, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Like I think he threw 2 scoreless innings. He just walked like 4 dudes.
Oh yeah, speaking of funny things, how about like Emerson Hancock having like a really nice start in Cincinnati and then a really nice start in Fenway when we're like, those are terrible matchups for him.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost done with our show, and we haven't even mentioned Julio Rodriguez, who had another great year. Obviously, I think, Jerry DiPoto has pointed this too, like a big turning point for this entire season was the Julio Rodriguez game, in Atlanta, where he put the team on his back and he hit the 2 big home runs. And it kind of right after you can trace their rise. The next day, they beat the snot out of the Braves on that weird Roku game. And then they were just off. And so, the Julio breakout there, and Julio had a nice little, a couple big, playoff moments too. That was, good to see. And Julio kind of starting to beat those allegations of like, he's not clutch, which based on the numbers has always not been true, but like, because he's a superstar, we hyper focus on the times he didn't come through versus when he did.
Well, and a great example of that too is like, look, game 7 didn't end well for him. It was obviously not a good at bat to end game 7 of the ALCS, but the way he started that game, though, the double down the line, and then he hits a homer, his next at bat or third at bat. I think it was the next at bat. Either way, like game 7 Julio was kind of a thing. Again, I know it didn't end well, but like game 7 Julio was kind of a thing. And in general, I think the best, most encouraging thing that came out of 2025 with this club was that in the biggest moments of the entire year, your stars, more often than not, were stars. Another guy that we should mention as well, real quick, or a couple of guys that we should mention, because there were so many injuries in the rotation, guys just didn't perform up to our expectations, like Logan Gilbert over the course of the year. George obviously missed the first month of the year, and that kind of derailed things a little bit for him. But like Bryan Wu stepping up, goes on that incredible streak, puts up ace-like numbers, makes his first all-star team, finishes top 5 in American League Cy Young voting. And remember, this is a guy that, had multiple Tommy John surgeries in his past, put up bad college numbers, and only a couple of years later in 2025 establishes himself as one of the best pitchers in all of Major League Baseball, and did it at a time where the Mariners absolutely needed something like that to swing in their direction. Now, Luis Castillo, obviously, it got ugly at times over the course of the year, but like for the most part, again, like we said, he was the stabilizer, and it was like, it really, truly, like, this isn't an exaggeration. I many times over the course of the year, I thought to myself, like, where the hell would this team be if they traded him last offseason?
Yep. And again, we've mentioned them in passing, but how about the breakout of Bizzardo in the big year he had, and also kind of the reemergence of both Matt Brash and Gabe Speier to really kind of, solidify the back end of that Mariners bullpen, which was a question mark going into last year. Now, the other 4 guys in the pen, it was kind of a revolving door. Vargas was okay, but it wasn't great, but the bullpen, those 4 guys were really good. Also, by the way, funny moment. How about Trent Thornton rounding the bases in his scooter after they clinched?
Yeah.
Get him back on a minor league deal. It was, there are a lot of like unsung heroes, and we could probably be like, hey, who's just the unsung hero? Who's the most underrated player, like underappreciated player? And I think you and I both, we did this a little bit, and I think we both landed on like Bizzardo, Speier.
Yeah,
like
Bizzardo's
those guys.
Yeah.
But I feel like every player had a moment And that's kind of how you have to do this thing. You have to have players step up at random times and get these big hits. And even if the rest of their tenure was a disaster for you, they found a way to help win a game. And that's kind of how you have to do this thing. That's how every team does this. Even the big teams like the Dodgers have their random, whatever game. And the Blue Jays have their random Will Wagner game or whatever it is, right? Like it just kind of part of baseball. It's what makes baseball so great is that you never know who will and who can and will step up when you least expect it. And the Mariners certainly had a large number of those moments this year. That was great to see. So it's an exciting year with a lot of fun memories. We could probably sit here for 4 or 5 hours and be like, hey, you remember that? And, oh yeah. Like it's a great season. It was a ton of fun to cover. Again, it's Cal, it's Dan, but then there's so many things, the Julio game, the Bryan Wu streak, the stabilization of Luis Castillo. And, Randy almost went 30-30 and that gets completely overlooked because he was so bad in the playoffs. And Cole Young had some absolute nukes out of nowhere that shocked people. Naylor went 20-30 as a first baseman, as the second slowest guy in baseball. Like even Mitch Garver had some big hits for you. And, Dylan Moore, we unfortunately witnessed the end of the Dylan Moore era, but that gave birth to the Leo Rivas era where Rivas had one of the biggest hits in Mariners history that we haven't even talked about yet.
On his birthday.
So it is kind of a wild season and I'm sure.
What about the Leo Rivas walk-off against the Cardinals? How about that?
What have you done? It is. We could talk about how bad it was that you had to go to 14 innings to beat that dumpster fire of a team, but sure. Let's focus on the positive here. Leo Rivas, what have you done?
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of fun. And again, we could sit here for hours and miss something that somebody out there thinks was like the funnest or the best moment of the year. And that's how you know it was a good season, is that we can't possibly talk about all the cool stuff that happened. Hopefully 2026 is better, though. That should be the goal.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, we talk Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. So because it was such a great year for the Mariners, it was, as a result, a great year for us here on Locked On Mariners. We took some pretty big steps and hit some more milestones on the show as our community continues to grow. We're incredibly appreciative of you guys for that. I just wanted to quickly go over these numbers here to just kind of put it into context, just how much like the show has grown over the last calendar year. In 2024, over on YouTube, we did 1.2 million views. With a watch time of 266,000, basically 267,000 hours. This year, with the addition of the Mariners postcast, and shout out to Chris and Anders for all their work after every single game. Once they, started doing that around the midway point of the season,
right around the All-Star break, I think
we doubled our YouTube views. Exactly, we went from 1.2 in 2024 to 2.4 in 2025. With a watch time of 405,000 hours. That's incredible. We started the year with 12,487 subscribers, and we ended with 16,304 subscribers. That's 3,817 new subscribers. Actually, we've added one since I put this together. So we've actually added 3,818. So shout out to the 3,818th subscriber. And then over on the podcast platforms, for those of you that listen on Apple or Spotify or what have you, we had an additional 1.45 million downloads of our episodes. And in 2024, we only had 811,000. So that's a pretty significant jump for us as well. So, again, thank you guys for all the support. And, the coolest moment for me, or the moment that kind of like humbled me the most this year was, and obviously a big reason for this, like I recognize this, is just like the Mariners went on an insane postseason run. It's the Mariners, right? So people are very interested because the Mariners never do anything like this, especially like on the national scale. People are going to be more interested in the Mariners than ever. But there's these charting websites, which how accurate are they actually? Who knows? But there's this charting website called Raphonic, and on there we were literally the number 2 baseball podcast in the entire United States of America. We were behind just John Boy, which, I mean, look, whatever the case might be for that, and whatever might have led to that, still the fact that a little Seattle Mariners podcast was number 2 among all the baseball podcasts, and there's a lot of big ones, from like Effectively Wild to all the John Boy podcasts to all the other Locked On podcasts, et cetera. There's so many baseball podcasts out there. The fact that we were number 2 for a time was pretty dang cool, I would say. So, if you were, if you listen over on podcast platforms and you helped get us to that point, thank you. Thank you. And looking forward to 2026 and hopefully an even bigger and better year. And hey, maybe we can take this thing all the way to the World Series and, get those World Series views. Be great.
Yeah. 2 things Ty won't mention, so I will. Most listened to podcast episode ever for us happened this year. What game? When was that, Ty? Do you recall?
I don't know. Donnie Barrel's signing.
Maybe it was because you weren't around that you don't remember, but yeah, our most listened to podcast ever, solo show with this guy. And number 2, and more importantly, confirmed earlier this year, Mina Kimes is Team Colby. Do not let Ty forget that. That was the biggest win of 2025, right. And we will have that forever. So
that does lead me to the last thing that I did want to mention. I wanted to thank all of our guests that we had on over the course of the year. Yeah, Mina Kimes, of course, for being gracious with her time to come on. Stacey Joe Ross, Ryan Divish, Gary Hill Jr., Aaron Goldsmith, R.M. Layton, Oliver Bochter, Joe Doyle. I might be forgetting a couple of names, but if you came on our show this year, thank you. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. All right. Well, that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.